Rama Rama Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Rama Rama Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare. Okay. Devotees, Hare Krishna. Let us begin our Vaishnava Etiquette for this evening. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachade Shatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, devotees, last night we finished, if I remember correctly, discussing kirtan. So this evening we will continue with discussing dancing. And if I remember correctly, let me just check. If I remember correctly, in Nectar of Devotion, there is, what is there? Let's see. Anyway, it's amongst the rules that one should dance in front of the deity, but I can't find it exactly right now. But it's there. So anyway, in our manual, it begins by pointing out that Srila Rupa Goswami states that one should learn to dance in front of the deities. Dancing should be graceful and enthusiastic, but not violent and wild. Yeah. Well, you know, it's sort of, sometimes kirtans reach a certain point of intensity, you could say, that some of the dancers, some of the devotees become inspired to dance somewhat wildly. I've seen, gosh. Of course, here in Radharanath Temple, it doesn't really happen so much, because I think we are more civilized. Either that or more laid back. You know, a couple of times when devotees, ladies, came from Russia, where sometimes, you know, if any of you have ever been to any of the big devotee festivals they have there or in Ukraine, then the ladies, some of the ladies, they dance together. just, sure. I mean, very rhythmically, very beautifully, in unison. It's really, I mean, it's just, as far as I can see, it's really nice. So yeah, we had a couple of devotees come down some few years ago, I forget how many years ago, but 4, 5, 6 years ago, maybe something like that. And I asked them to try to get our ladies into that sort of dancing. It didn't really work. Anyway, whatever. But it's nice. It's very nice. Violent and wild. I've seen things get smashed and people get trampled and children get hurt sometimes. I haven't seen, actually, you know what? Niranjan Maharaj, back in the 90s sometime, when around in the Gopanima festival time, just before Gopanima, it became the thing to do that everyone had to come on Navadvip Mandal Parikrama. And it really turned into a big event. And particularly Tamal Krishna Goswami, very influential devotee, he was really insistent. Shiva Ram Swami was coming, Govinda Maharaj, Indradyumna Maharaj to some degree. And so it became the thing to do. And so Niranjan Maharaj, there was a kirtan with, there's hundreds of devotees. There was a kirtan in the, what's it they called? Dharmeshwar Mahaprabhu temple. You know that. Dharmeshwar in Navadvip town. And Niranjan Maharaj was having some trouble with one of his knees. So in this kirtan, this major kirtan, my Lord, Madhudvisa Prabhu decided he had to pick up Niranjan Maharaj from behind and throw him into the air. And Madhudvisa was a pretty powerful man. At that point, he wasn't really an old man yet. He's probably like 50 or whatever, something. So he just hurled him into the air, just way up. And Niranjan Maharaj came down on an angle and tore his, I don't know what it's called, but some tendons, cartilage, ligaments, tore them, just ripped them. And they've never repaired. Yeah. And so that's a pretty good example that dancing shouldn't be violent and wild. It's meant to be blissful and happy and jolly. Yeah. So anyway, point number Roman 3, dancing in the traditional Gaudiya way, as demonstrated by Srila Prabhupada, should be the standard. That's the picture you see there. Top left, that's the famous Swami step. Yeah, which Prabhupada himself introduced and trained the devotees to do. But even having said that, there are many nice ways devotees can dance. And like sort of coming together, the picture, there's two pictures you see just down a little on the left with a tick by it. Two devotees, it looks like they're going out and coming in rhythmically together. So to do like that's nice. And the same sort of approach, the right-hand picture, devotees are basically doing the same thing. Maybe it's not depicted so clearly, but that is what's going on there. Yeah. So, devotees then, just beneath those two pictures, devotees forming rows, one behind the other, and while continuing to face the deities, moving towards and then away from them rhythmically. And devotees moving in a circle. Yeah, I guess that's the picture above on the right where there's 6 devotees. I think that's probably that. So devotees should take care to see that the formations are maintained and that they're in line. I remember in 1976, Prabhupada came to Bhaktivedanta Manor, and the German Sankirtan book distribution party came. And there was about, 40 or 50 of them, mainly brahmacharis, almost all. And they were like real, I shouldn't say it perhaps, but stormtrooper type, heavy and really kind of pushy. And there was a kirtan in the temple room in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and they almost smashed a few of the windows by sort of bashing into them. It's not really so good. While dancing in formation, devotees should raise hands, hold hands, etc., as may be required for that particular formation. Hands raised, this is a very standard way of expressing happiness in Krishna consciousness, in kirtan. Let's see. Oh, and then over the page, oh, Krishna. There are 3 examples of how not to do it. The first one, whacking other devotees. The middle one, hurling a child up in the air. Oh my Lord. And then the right-hand one, this is devotees spinning. And, the interesting thing is that Radha and Krishna do this. And there are pictures, like paintings, of Radha and Krishna spinning exactly like this. Of course, we have, right? Sometimes our devotees do it. And the idea is to throw the other one onto the ground. Right? We've seen it how many times? Yeah, and just get the other one to lose control altogether. But definitely Radha and Krishna spin like that. And sometimes when they spin so fast you can't really tell who's who. But anyway, let's just see what they say. This dancing is not a spectator sport, and devotees should not simply stand and watch. All should participate. However, those who are unwilling, particularly guests and newcomers or those who are sick, should not be forced. Then dancing in ways that can cause injury to devotees should be done. No, should be avoided. It's just a joke, by the way. Actually, I was trying to see who's awake. Yeah, anyway, two devotees clasping hands and spinning because it may be harmful. It can be harmful, yeah. Spinning alone with arms outstretched. Tossing children and even grown-ups in the air or lifting them. Pushing excessively while moving in the circle. Then, yes, men and women should dance in separate portions of the temple. One should watch the lead dancer always and synchronize. You know what happens sometimes, I mean, I don't know actually how frequent it is, but it happens sometimes, is that some of the men are just into it so much and just, they are really flying that they kind of take over part of the ladies' part of the temple room. And therefore the ladies just have to kind of stand back and just, watch out. So that's not nice. One should watch the lead dancer always and synchronize. The perfect dancing is in Lord Chaitanya's style, with arms raised or folded hands, with enthusiasm and devotion. Well, that's nice. Anyway, that's all interesting. Now I have just a little bit of something extra here. This is a letter. Well, it begins with a letter from Srila Prabhupada. Regarding your question about the dancing should be done enthusiastically by raising the hands like Panchatattva. You can also dance enthusiastically by raising hands. All of Lord Chaitanya's followers used to dance with raised hands. If someone dances with ecstasy, that is all right. And Prabhupada's referring there to sort of like freestyle dancing, just, in whatever way comes to you. So that's all right. But it is better to dance with raised hands. That's nice, isn't it? Like that. Oh, and one of the rules, here it is, I've got it here. It's from the 6th chapter of Nectar of Devotion. It's rule number 4. Let me just check which rule number 4, because there's a few rules number 4. Let's just have a look here. Okay, it's not in the first group. It's not in the second group. Yes, it's in the third group. It's rule number 24. One should learn to dance before the deity. So it's nice to learn to dance in some sort of fluid way. It's actually really nice. It's something which we should learn. I told you the other day, didn't I, the story about Tamal Krishna Goswami trying to get permission from the city authorities for some aspects of building the Juhu temple, but they all refused him that day, so he came back to the temple in the evening, and the arti was going on, the devotees were in the temple room, kirtan was going on, Prabhupada was in the temple, but Tamal Krishna Goswami was just sort of, he just didn't feel like dancing because it had been too tough a day. But at the end, Srila Prabhupada said, even if the city officials will not give you permission, still you must dance in kirtan. And once a devotee asked Prabhupada something like, if we're not feeling enthusiastic, how can we become enthusiastic? And Prabhupada basically said something along the lines that you pray to Krishna, something like, please make me enthusiastic to become enthusiastic. Something like that. Okay, so there we go, devotees. And next is speech. Yeah. Speech. Well, okay, let me just see what notes I've got here. Speech. Speech. Speaking. Got a few. Come off just a little bit. Okay. So anyway, let's have a look at our manual and see what our devotees have said. The urge to speak is very strong. And as soon as we get an opportunity, we begin speaking. Srila Prabhupada explains that if we do not speak Krishna Katha, then we speak all sorts of nonsense. Well, Prabhupada made the point, or is it even in the Bhagavad? The Bhagavata makes the point, but it's somewhere between Prabhupada and the Bhagavatam, that life is going on the basis of questions and answers. That at home, husband and wife and children, they're asking each other questions. And someone is giving answers. At work, it's questions and answers. At school, it's questions and answers. Between business people, it's questions and answers. How much is this? It's so much. Well, how much is that? So, and Prabhupada made the point that the baby birds in the nest, they're waiting for their mother to come home, and they're sort of squawking. And as they're squawking, they're saying, "Come on, come home." So even the animals, the birds, they're sort of living on the basis of questions and answers. It's such an extremely prominent part of life. And, well, the urge to speak is extremely strong. I'm sure you're familiar with the first verse of Nectar of Instruction. Let me just read that. Why not? Vacha vegam manasa krodha vegam jiva vegam udara pasta vegam etan vegan yo vishaheta dira sarvam apimam pritivim sashishyat. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, first of all at least, vacha. Sri Bhagavan uvacha. Vacha vegam means the vegam means the urge, the sensory, the pressure of the senses. Vacho, the urge to speak. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. It's a very classic verse, famous, very famous verse. And it begins with the urge to speak. It's very powerful. It's really hard, like children, stopping them from speaking. Adults, stopping them from speaking. Women, stopping them from speaking. Men, stopping them from speaking. It's a slightly different point. I mean, it is a bit of a different point, but it's related. Srila Prabhupada had a nephew who was actually hyperactive. And he would just run around the house back and forth, and it was a disturbance. So one time, Srila Prabhupada, but the boy liked kachoris. And Prabhupada told the boy, if you can sit quietly for 2 minutes, I will give you a kachori. 2 minutes. If you can sit quietly. And devotees, you know what happened? The boy did not get his kachori because he just couldn't manage. Because, well, vegam, the urge, it's a drive, it's within us. And it's so hard to stop it coming out. Yes. So, anyway, let's just get back to our book. Right, so the urge. So, if we don't speak Krishna Katha, then we speak all sorts of nonsense. Like today, of course I wasn't there, but today at lunch, Who did you sit next to? Were you there? Not Anukul was there. What did you speak about? Chapatis.
But he did speak about who Yamaraj and Yudhishthira, their relationship with each other.
Really? Okay. Were you two sitting together?
I was sitting with Madhurya Kadambini.
Okay. And what did you speak about?
We were praying that we can get to Europe to see our Guru Maharaj.
Okay. Well, that's Krishna conscious. As long as you weren't just talking about the weather, how are you, and all that sort of thing. I was going to say, in fact, I will say, tomorrow morning at breakfast, why don't you sit down next to someone and start a Krishna conscious discussion, like a philosophical discussion. The class will have been, I guess, Ram Govinda Maharaj, is it? Will give class on Thursday. I'm sure it'll be interesting. Daksha has just been killed, and now the story goes on from there. Why don't you do that? Sit down with someone and start a Krishna conscious discussion, maybe about the class. You know, Maharaj said this, that. What did you think of that? Of course, you've got to be able to ask questions in the right way, otherwise the devotees will just answer yes or no, and that's it. You have to be able to ask questions which will stimulate them to give sort of a developed response, and not just a no or a yes or a, how did you like the class? It was okay. Back to prasadam. Yeah. So we should do this. Yeah, we should do this. In our seminar on, I think it's Vaishnava relationships, it must be. We do that. We force the devotees that they must sit with someone they normally don't sit with, and they must start a Krishna conscious discussion. And some of the organizers go around and listen into their discussions to see if they are Krishna conscious or if they're just how are you discussions. Yeah, but anyway, in general, if we don't speak Krishna Katha, then there's a tendency, if not to speak all sorts of nonsense, but at least to talk sort of more mundane type things, rather than, I read in Bhagavad Gita yesterday this and this and this, and what do you think about that? An actual scriptural Krishna conscious discussion. So such talk is called prajalpa and is born of our material identification. I just want to read a verse to you. Which verse is it? Yes, it's Nectar of Instruction, verse 2. Atyahara prayashascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha loliam cha shadbir bhaktir vinashyati. One's devotional service is spoiled when one becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. 2. Over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. 3. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. I mean, in a certain sense, it's much easier to just start a little discussion about something fairly mundane than to really start like an in-depth, analytical type of Krishna conscious discussion. But we should practice. You know, we're doing sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti goes all the way up to the level of perfection, to just asakti, and then next is bhava, which is part of perfection. So all the rest up to the level of asakti, which is really high. These are all different aspects of sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti meaning the practicing devotional service. Practicing because you're not expert, you can't do it properly. I mean, perfectly. Yeah, you're practicing. Practice makes perfect. But until you become perfect, you got to keep practicing. So, yeah. So we're on the level of practicing, and we have to practice in so many ways. We have to practice so many different types of activities, but in that deliberate practicing type of way. Like even chanting our japa. We got to keep practicing, keep focused, and not think that, yeah, I know how to chant japa, no problem. As soon as you start thinking like that, and you lose your attention on the japa, then your japa starts becoming all funny. Yeah. And you start chanting like, well, we're going to be going on to japa at some point, I think. So we'll talk about it then. But or have we already? I can't remember. Anyway, let me just say it. That there are different types of improper japa. The other day we spoke about dive bomb japa. Do you remember that? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. And there are others. We'll talk about some of the others. There is the Hare Krishna, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mini mantra. Are you familiar with that? Mini mantra, I mean, there are different versions, but one famous version is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. That's the Hare Krishna, a version of the Hare Krishna mini mantra. Then there's also the Hare Krishna maxi mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Yeah, I mean, devotees can get really creative sometimes. Boy, oh boy, just amazing. So where am I? What did I say? Oh yeah, speech. Okay, prajalpa, niyamagraha. And then, well, let's just finish the verse because it's a good one. So, prajalpa niyamagraha, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. I mean, they're all deadly, actually, so destructive if they really take root within your heart. But here we're talking about talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. There's in, I think it must be 4th canto, Maharaj Prithu, when the 4 Kumars come to visit him, and he's sitting on his throne in his palace, and he looks up, and there's the 4 Kumars coming in, and he jumps up of his throne and just runs down to meet them, just so inspired and enthusiastic. And the verse says that he was so attracted, to the effect, so attracted to getting the association of the 4 Kumars. It was just like a conditioned soul is attracted to sense gratification. That's a good one, isn't it? In other words, our tendency towards sense gratification is so deeply ingrained. So anyway, all mundane literatures are also practical exhibitions of the urge to speak. Srila Prabhupada explains in the Nectar of Instruction that materialistic people read heaps of newspapers, magazines and novels, solve crosswords, and do many nonsensical things. In this fashion, people simply waste their valuable time and energy. In the Western countries, old men retired from active life play cards, fish, watch television, and debate about useless socio-political schemes. All these and other frivolous activities are included in the prajalpa category. Intelligent people interested in Krishna consciousness should never take part in these activities. And Roman 4, Sri Rupa Goswami advocates the process of Krishna Katha. But like I said, you got to practice. We have to practice. Talking to other devotees, Krishna Katha, and not just sort of defaulting into something mundane. So, Sri Rupa Goswami advocates the process of Krishna Katha. Talk of all subjects connected to Lord Krishna as a means to counteract the urge to speak. Therefore, if we must talk, we should talk Krishna Katha. So devotees, you remember what I said about tomorrow breakfast time? Right. Right. You know what? I'm going to check in our class tomorrow night. I'm going to check who did that and who either just didn't say anything or who just got off on some sort of general discussion of some sort. Is that okay? Because it's something we got to practice. So before we speak, we should ponder whether, is it necessary, is it kind, is it right? Devotees should avoid speech that offends, particularly blasphemy of devotees, which is the first offense against the holy name. Vaishnava Etiquette will surely choke our tender devotional creeper very quickly. Let me just tell you a little story. It's a joke, but it's a little story. It's actually quite good. There was, in one village area, there were different villages here and there was one scholar. He was very scholarly. He was really expert. And he was a really good speaker. You know, he'd start speaking, people would just be fascinated. So, in the other villages around, people always wanted to come and speak to the village, the whole village. But he was irritable. He was short-tempered. But still he was expert. So one day, the elders from one village, they went to see him. And they asked him, will you please come to our village and give a talk, like a lecture to the villagers? Everyone will be there. They're just so keen to hear you speak. And the man said, oh, I don't know. I don't really want to. And why doesn't one of you? But they begged him, so he said, oh, okay. So he rolled up at the village. Everybody's there. And he's sitting there. And he looks at the audience and he says, okay, so do you know what I'm going to talk about? The fact that he was speaking had been advertised, but what he was going to speak about had not. So, okay, you know what I'm going to talk about? Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? You don't know? Well, I'm not going to tell you. And he walked out. So he just walked out. And the villagers were just bewildered. So some days later, a week or two or something, the elders came back to him and said, you know, we're so sorry about what happened. But still the villagers, our people, they really want to hear you. Will you please come? Oh, I don't want to. You know what happened last time. Yes, but please. They're very sincere. They really want to hear. Oh, all right then. So he arrived. And the village, everybody was there. Everyone was there. So he sat down. Right. So, you know what I'm going to talk about? They were ready for him this time. And all the village said, you know what I'm going to talk about? You know? Do you know? They all said, yes, we know. And so he said, well, if you already know, I don't have to tell you. And he walked out. So, a little while after, the village elders came and said, we're so sorry about what happened, but our people, they really want to hear from you. Please come. Oh, all right, all right, all right. So again, there's the whole village, and here comes a fellow, he sits down. And this time the village people were really ready. So, yeah, you know what I'm going to talk, you know what I'm going to talk about. Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? So half the people said, yes, we know. And the other half said, no, we don't know. So the man said, all right. Well, those who know can tell those who don't know, and I'm going. I think it was more to wake you up than anything else. But as Prabhupada says, devotees should avoid speech that offends. Yeah. And let me I have just a little bit something here from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verse 15. Austerity of speech. Do you remember we talked the other day about austerity of something? What was it? Huh? Austerity of the body. Cleanliness. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. And Srila Prabhupada's purport. One should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students, but such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. This is penance as far as talking is concerned. Besides that, one should not talk nonsense. The process of speaking in spiritual circles is to say something upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up what he is saying. At the same time, such talk should be very pleasurable to the ear. By such discussions, one may derive the highest benefit and elevate human society. There is a limitless stock of Vedic literature, and one should study this. This is called penance of speech, or austerity of speech. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Is it on?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I was wondering if we are in a situation, of course, if we're in work or out of devotee circles, of course, a lot of the
Where other devotees?
out of the devotee circle.
Okay.
A lot of the time, the conversation will end up being on the mundane level. So how do we try to, even with those people that we interact with, to leave some semblance of Krishna consciousness?
Yeah, of course it depends, but, if they're people who you're just with every day, then what to do is, as much as possible, keep to yourself. Because, if you're with the same people every day, so in the beginning, you can present something about Krishna consciousness, and maybe some will respond, but others may well not respond. And you just can't keep on every day sort of browbeating them. But otherwise, if it's just, like Srila Prabhupada, people would come to meet him. When we first got Bhaktivedanta Mana, Shamsundar arranged for quite a number of important materialistic people to come and meet Prabhupada from all different sorts of backgrounds. One of them even was a Grand Prix racing driver, Graham Hill, came to see Prabhupada. I mean, sure. Talk about someone living in a different world. But Prabhupada was so expert, he could, he would sort of feel them out a little bit to start off with, just in terms of who they are and what they are. But then he would bring it around to Krishna consciousness. So that's an art, it's a skill. Because it's not just, kind of being dogmatic. You got to bring it around in a natural type of way, an interesting type of way, so the people will feel interested, attracted. Yeah. So that, you know what you have to do? Practice. We have to practice so many things. And preaching, all different types of preaching, giving classes, meeting people on the street, on the Sunday, new people on the Sunday program. These are different types of preaching situations. And, there's a number more. We have to practice so that in due course, ultimately, we're able to deal with practically anyone in such a way that it's interesting for them. But it takes some practice. Is that okay? And with the ones you're working with, and you just see them every day, I would say, bring prasadam fairly regularly. Yeah, because prasadam is very powerful. And if they're not interested in discussing, after you've initially tried to interest them, but some of them just not interested. But prasadam, it's very likely they'll be very interested. Yeah. Is that okay?
And Maharaj, I was just, you were reflecting on how wonderfully the devotees dance in Russia, the Matajis, and I was just reflecting in Ujjain, when we often went to meet Bhakti Charamaj, all of the men would dance in such synchronized harmony so beautifully,
Really?
including Maharaj. So that was
Wow.
Something
That's
I was
nice. So Indians can do it. That's a racist statement, I'm sorry. But that's nice, it's really nice.
And he would be very much part of those leading the team.
Right. Well, he's into dancing, yeah.
My question is more of a maybe clarification on that Krishna Katha. On my first year in trying to practice Krishna consciousness, I happened to find in a temple in Estonia, in one of the boxes, a Vaishnava Etiquette course by Bhakti Charuswami. And I really took it on board, maybe a little bit too literally. I threw out the entire flat full of furniture, started sleeping on the floor, did everything on the floor.
Wow.
Started reading Bhagavad Gita somewhat obsessively. I really hyper-focused on it, and I wanted to talk about it constantly because I felt every couple of days that I have found some secret between the lines, some serious life hack for spiritual life. And
Right.
I got really, I think, annoying because I did not make any friends. I was taking prasadam alone that time. And I was asked to shut up, essentially, if I tried to approach somebody with my some sort of personal realizations about the super soul or so on.
Well, you know, if you become overbearing, browbeating, and just talking about yourself, then that'll happen. That's why, you know, practice has to be there to make it interesting. But like tomorrow, obviously we should try and make it interesting, but at least try and talk something about Krishna rather than just, you know, how's the weather or, you know, something like that.
Maharaj, we see Prabhupada took prasad mainly alone. Was it his practice, or was he taking a devotee's?
Or was he what?
Was he taking a disciple's prasadam?
He wasn't. He would practically always take on his own. I mean, occasionally he would take prasadam. It's coming up, actually. He would take prasadam with the devotees occasionally. But otherwise, you know, as I understand, more than 90% of the time, he would just take prasadam on his own, and he'd never speak. He'd just take prasadam. Occasionally he'd invite, if some senior disciple had just arrived from somewhere else, he would invite them to have lunch with him occasionally. But there's a time, maybe it's tomorrow, in the next few days at least, when Prabhupada took disciples to India and they went to the temple of one of his godbrothers, and Prabhupada was taking prasadam with the disciples.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It was just you were looking for the one chapter, dancing before the deities. It's chapter 9, like the fourth group. Yeah.
In Nectar of Devotion?
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's the elaboration on it. It's listed out in chapter 6. Yeah, number 9. That's what happened. Oh, okay. Chapter 9. Anyway, okay, thank you. Dancing before the deity. In the Dwarka Mahatmya, the importance of dancing before the deity is stated by Lord Krishna as follows. A person who's in a jubilant spirit, who feels profound devotional ecstasy while dancing before me, and who manifests different features of bodily expression, can burn away all the accumulated sinful reactions he's stocked up for many, many thousands of years. In the same book, there's a statement by Narada wherein he asserts, from the body of any person who claps and dances before the deity, showing manifestations of ecstasy, all the birds of sinful activities fly away upward. Just as by clapping the hands one can cause many birds to fly away, similarly the birds of all sinful activities which are sitting on the body can be made to fly away simply by dancing and clapping before the deity of Krishna. Thank you. That's good. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.